HR employees, what was the most ridiculous or hilarious complaint you ever received? Story 1. Once had to tell a guy a court order means the company cannot ignore it, regardless of how much he shouted at me or threatened to end my life. I did genuinely look into it because it was the first I ever heard of anyone having money ordered by a court to be diverted. So our payroll team sent over the court order and session dates it all took place in. I asked our solicitors to look it up and see what went down, since it was all a matter of public record. Ends up, our employee never bothered going to the court to contest the order and just ignored it. So, armed with this knowledge, I brought him in and laid it all out. Initially, he listened and just sat and waited for me to finish. Then, after I'm done and explained nothing further can be done, nor can we amend the payments, he explodes at me, personally blaming me for all his problems and that he can't afford these payments. Finally, after listening to him shout at me for 10 minutes and blaming me for his problems, I dropped my professional demur and flat out told him that if he bothered me to defend himself in court as much as he fruitlessly was trying to do here, maybe he wouldn't be in this position. At that point, he threatened to end my life, but shouted it loud enough that HR outside the meeting room heard it. My HR manager came in and just told him to leave, and he was fired for gross misconduct. At which point, he tried to swing a punch at my HR manager, who was an amateur boxer. He knocked the guy out, put him in the recovery position, and called 999 for an ambulance and police to attend our work. It was the most eventful HR meeting I ever had. It looks like someone didn't take the court order part of the phrase seriously. I mean, it's not like it's an optional rule, like please don't wear white after Labor Day. But hey, I guess some people just like to live life on the edge. I hope this guy learned his lesson and realized that court orders are not something to mess with. Maybe next time he'll hire a good lawyer and defend himself properly instead of trying to take out his frustrations on innocent bystanders. Story 2. I was the person complained about, and 2 decades later, I'm still salty about it. I got called into the HR manager's office one day and was told that I was being written up for discussing inappropriate and scandalous naughty things in the office. I had never done that, ever. I was still a very much closeted gay boy at the time, so there wasn't a chance in heck I was going to talk about my intimate life to the middle-aged woman I worked with. Who complained about me, I asked, being young and naive. We can't tell you that. They're confidentiality rules, HR said. Okay, I understand. What was it that I supposedly said? We can't tell you that either. You may use that to discover who lodged the complaint. So I'm being written up because an anonymous person complained that I was saying inappropriate things in the office, but you won't tell me who complained or what I supposedly said? That's right. Now please sign this form to indicate that you understand the severity of your infraction. No, I won't do that. You have to. It was a stalemate for almost 20 minutes while I refused to sign their form. They threatened to fire me, but I still refused to sign. In the end, she made some comment on the form about my unwillingness to participate in the process. Then, to top it off, the rest of the office wondered why I completely stopped speaking to all of them altogether. I refused to engage in any of the usual non-office related talk. If it was not 100% required conversation in order to do my job, I flat out ignored my coworker's presence. Again, I was called into HR and reprimanded for my abrasive demeanor. I quit that job shortly after. You know, it's always the quiet ones who get accused of saying inappropriate things, isn't it? And then they won't even tell you who accused you or what exactly you're accused of saying. It's like being accused of a crime without knowing what crime you're supposed to have committed. Who needs a workplace where you're accused of things you didn't do and are treated unfairly? You'll find a new job where you can be your fabulous self and talk about all the inappropriate things you want, just maybe not in the office. Story 3. Not HR, but my company is too small to have one, so it just falls on me. Used to have an accounts receivable clerk who would snack at her desk all day long. We are pretty casual, laid-back company, so it's not a big deal as long as she was getting her work done, but then it escalated to having food constantly being delivered. Tacos in the morning, pizza at lunch, Chinese in the afternoon. It was bizarre and made it difficult for her to work when she's eating full meals all day. I was on the fence about saying something until she brought in an Instant Pot. She plugged it in and cooked a freaking pork roast at her desk, poured in barbecue sauce she brought and ate it all day. I was dumbfounded. It was so strange. I pulled her aside the next day and told her how unprofessional it was. She was shocked and told me I was being unfair because I never specifically said no one was allowed to bring in an Instant Pot. She truly seemed genuinely surprised that she wasn't allowed to do that. She scaled it down after that, but I sometimes wonder how much further she would have gone if I never said anything. At some point, there'd have to have been a full spit-roasted pig over a bed of coals. It's great that you were able to address the issue with your employee in a calm and professional manner, and that she was receptive to your feedback. It's important to set clear boundaries and expectations in the workplace, even in a laid-back environment, to ensure that everyone is able to work productively and comfortably. Story 4. I was once summoned to HR. When I got there, one of my employees was already sitting in the head HR lady's office with a "what the F, really?" look on his face. The HR lady goes into a diatribe about how this employee is a chauvinistic pig that doesn't respect women and thinks he's better than all women. On and on about how just awful this guy is. Employee was my lead software dev and was awesome at his job and a great guy otherwise. Turns out the HR lady had asked him to write a spreadsheet full of formulas to calculate open enrollment dollar values for withholding based on all the available options and individual pay rates. He told her that, "I can help, but I've got this payment gateway project that's due, and I don't really have a ton of time. Can I just show you how to get started instead?" And that's how the argument started. My response was, "Okay, employee, you can leave, thank you." Then I told her that if Excel didn't open, that's IT. Custom sheets with formulas and pay data for employees, that's HR, and that I could recommend some resources for learning Excel. That witch was constantly trying to get IT to do her job for her. Story 5. Not HR, but I have a story about an HR person that I will never forget. The company I worked for hired a new girl in the HR department. She was young and very enthusiastic. I'm sure this was probably her first job out of college. Cut to a week or so later, and I'm riding in the elevator on the way up to the executive floor, and she steps in with me. A couple floors later, we stop, and an older gentleman wearing a polo shirt and jeans gets on. Before I could greet him, she said, "Pretty casual for a workday, huh?" I had to stifle my laughter when he replied with, "That's one of the benefits of owning the company." She turned an amazing color of red that I haven't seen since. It was all in good fun, though. She ended up working there for a long time. To be fair, if I was the owner, I'd have admired that. She's brave enough to pull someone up for dressing too casually for the job, which means she obviously takes her job very seriously. Wow, that HR person must have been mortified when the owner of the company got into the elevator with them. But I'm glad to hear that it turned out to be a good-natured moment and didn't have any negative consequences. It can be tough starting out in a new job, especially if it's your first one out of college. So I hope she learned from the experience and was able to develop a good working relationship with the company's owner. Story 6. I told my coworker, as professionally as I could, that it wasn't appropriate for her to be using her phone while at work, teaching kids supposedly. She spent all of her time on Facebook. Little kids would be screaming and wailing on each other literally 10 feet away while she was totally oblivious. She complained by email to HR that I was rude and confrontational. They pulled me aside and told me to be more careful about how I spoke to coworkers. I told them my side of the story. They spoke to her again. She got a written warning. They didn't tell me what happened, but I gathered from office gossip that she lost her crap and started shouting at the HR staff. Rude and confrontational, perhaps? Anyway, she's on her final warning now, and she has a habit of hitting on the married dads of our kids, involving children in adult matters. Why hasn't your mommy paid your fees yet? Don't you want to come to daycare? And generally being an unprofessional, self-absorbed pain in the tuchus. So can't wait until she gets fired. Story 7. I'm not in HR, but someone called HR on me. I work with a few people that aren't that fluent in English. One of my coworkers was trying to explain to me what kind of tacos he ate and could not remember the word for stingrays. So he took my notebook and drew a picture of a stingray and wrote the word turtle, so it looked like this. Crudely drawn stingray plus the word turtle. A lady I worked with went through my notebook, saw the picture of the stingray plus the word turtle. She called HR because she thought I was writing notes about her in my notebook. She said that the horribly drawn stingray plus the word turtle meant that I wanted to punch her in the face because she's slow like a turtle. Definitely a reach. I didn't get in trouble. I was just told by my boss that I'm not allowed to talk about turtles anymore in case it upsets her. I rarely talk about turtles, so this isn't really a problem for me. It's kind of funny how someone could misinterpret a crudely drawn stingray and the word turtle as a threat towards them. I'm glad that you didn't get in any trouble over it, but it's unfortunate that you have to be careful about what you say around that coworker now. Hopefully your coworker can see that there was no ill intent behind your note, and you can all move past it. And who knows, maybe you'll come across a real turtle someday and have a great story to share. Story 8. I recently had HR tell me that one of my staff had been undersupplied in his annual leave over the past few years, and he needed to take at least 10 days off over the next 6 months to correct the leave liability. Paid at a higher rate than usual to make up for the error, of course. He could take a 2-week block, or say a day off a week until he'd use the leave. His choice. He was so enraged over being given extra paid holidays that he wrote to our general manager to complain, screamed at me, his boss, I know my rights, refused the leave, or even to discuss why he wouldn't take it. Anyway, I wrote his performance review this week, and there are multiple goals about professional, respectful behavior that need to be reached in order for him to get a raise this year. Yeah, not so much. Oh, and he still has 10 days off. Story 9. Once was asked to investigate a sexual harassment situation where 3 different women were coming on to a male coworker throughout their shift. I took down the details, got the names, easy peasy investigation. So I thought. A week later, nobody by these descriptions or names had ever worked for the company. I decided to talk to the gentleman again. After a lengthy conversation where things didn't quite stack up, I asked him how these women communicated with him. I poop you not. With a straight face, he looks me in the eye and replies, telepathically. Like I'm some kind of idiot. I had never sent an employee for psychological evaluation up to that point, and I hope never to have to again. So yeah, I was asked by a delusional schizophrenic to conduct a sexual harassment investigation on the voices in his head. It's all fun and games until he blurts out, "Shut up, you horse," in the middle of a meeting. It's unfortunate that the situation turned out to be a result of someone's mental illness, but it's good that you were able to figure it out. Dealing with people who have delusions can be tricky, and it's important to handle these situations with care and compassion. Story 10. Not HR, but I talk to people, so I know a few stories. Here's my favorite in terms of how ridiculous it is. The HR director found hookah in the woman's bathroom. It wasn't hidden or anything, it was just there in plain sight on the floor. Turns out one employee is addicted to smoking hookah, and she brought it on her first day of work. She then demanded to be allowed to smoke hookah in the bathroom, but they came to the agreement that she can take a break every day to go out and smoke it in the nearby hookah place if she wants to. A little background, I work in IT in Ukraine. IT specialists here make good money, and they're also spoiled due to high demand. So people complain about all sorts of stupid stuff all the time, like free lunches are served in containers they don't like, or elevators need an AC and stuff like that. Story 11. My HR department once fell for a phishing email and sent everyone's W-2s to a random hacker. HR then informed everyone via a mass email with no read receipts at 9 p.m. on a Friday, even though multiple people were on vacation and had left instructions to be called in an emergency. When I got back from my trip a week later and expressed my concern about her not actually notifying me about this, she totally brushed it off. I said, "Do you realize that I need to freeze my credit and I'm 7 days late in doing so?" She said, "No, don't freeze your credit. You won't be able to use your credit cards if you do." Another time, during a workers' comp claim, I needed to speak to our claims adjuster, and she said an adjuster doesn't get assigned until after the claim is settled. That's the exact opposite of how that works. She was my stupid complaint. Oh boy, HR departments can be such a trip sometimes. I mean, falling for a phishing email and sending everyone's W-2s to a hacker, that's like the office equivalent of walking into a tree while staring at your phone. And then they inform everyone about it on a Friday night at 9 p.m. Come on, guys, let's at least give people a fighting chance to react. Our friend here deserves a medal for putting up with this nonsense. Story 12. Not an HR employee, but I recently reported a bus driver for bringing his girlfriend to work and rubbing her feet while driving. She sat on a spot right behind the driver and put her feet where he could reach for them with one hand. I took a picture of the whole thing and debated on what to do with it for a while. On the one hand, I didn't want this guy to lose his job, nor have to explain why he was rubbing his girlfriend's feet at work. Imagine the awkwardness. On the other side, he missed a turn and then took a U-turn on a downhill blind curve where we could have easily gotten nailed. In the end, I concluded, when other people's lives are in your hands, that's what your hands should focus on. You did the right thing. While I can empathize with him, the safety of the passengers should be his main concern. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of this video and have a wonderful day. Story 13. I was the one being complained about. A patient had asked if it was okay to remove her IV fluids because she was going home. She was one of those people who was very convinced that if we took her fluids out, she would pass away. She was admitted for the common cold and uses her insurance to pay like this, so she didn't have to spend a dime. Anyway, I told her that it's okay, ma'am, we are just running regular saline water through your IV. No more meds. You can go home today and we can take that out. Get a notice from HR the next day saying I wasn't using proper medical terminology for IV fluids. HR didn't do crap. They just tossed the complaint at me without asking questions. I wonder what these turds would do if they actually had a real issue, if they already go to extremes for such make-believe problems. Looks like we've got a real stickler for medical terminology on our hands here. I mean, seriously, who cares if the nurse said regular saline water instead of intravenous sodium chloride solution, or whatever fancy term they wanted to hear? It's not like the patient was going to be like, "Oh no, I can't leave until you use the proper medical terminology to describe my IV fluids." I mean, come on, let's be real here. HR should have just tossed that complaint in the trash where it belonged. Story 14. I was a manager and had to call our HR in on this one. We had a computer that was used by multiple people, and a couple of girls complained that it had a virus and corn always popping up when they turned it on in the morning. I decided to have a look and see if someone was messing around on the closing shift, so I looked at the security footage, and lo and behold, one of the supervisors was watching corn and jerking off. When we called him in, he didn't deny it, but he said technically he didn't pull his dong out, he just played with it in his pants, so it's not really that bad. The HR guy just looked at him and didn't say a word until after what seemed like forever, the jerker said, "So I guess I'm fired," and then walked out. Smart response on the HR guy's part. Story 15. You wouldn't believe the headaches that I received when management signed a new copier/printer lease, which reduced the overall number of printers in exchange for centrally located multiplex copiers. Evidently, people feel their social standing is signified if they have a printer or two in their office. My favorite was an executive assistant who stated that because she wears heels to work, she couldn't walk to the new copier and requested that a reasonable accommodation would be to replace the printer she had in her office. IT person here, the amount of people that have printer envy is astounding, and if they have color printing and someone else doesn't, oh man, suddenly I have a job function that requires it as well. Always seems to be the people over 45-ish that care so much. Story 16. If a lot of people ask for more hours, I would tell them, I don't have more hours in your department, but I can give you hours in X department. The next schedule would come out and they would say, I have too many hours. So I would give them like approximately 10 fewer hours with still 15 to 25 hours, and then it would be, I don't have enough hours. So then I would say, okay, remember that week when I gave you 30 to 35 hours and that was too much? And they would say, I want 35 hours. So I would try my best and usually end up with 30 hours because hours were slim, and then it would be, I have too many hours. And then I would stop talking to them because I was going crazy. The classic case of the grass is always greener on the other side. I can totally relate to this story. It's like you can never please everyone no matter how hard you try. They ask for more hours, you give them more hours, and then suddenly it's too much. But if you give them fewer hours, it's not enough. It's like trying to find a balance on a seesaw with an elephant on one end and a feather on the other. Story 17. After 20 years in HR, I have too many to remember. The most recent one was on Monday when an employee emailed me with a request to remind everyone to be careful with scented lotions. Her area reeked from something that smelled like Moroccan oil. These kinds of emails are a bomb waiting to go off. Everyone gets paranoid, and I end up replying to 50 people that they smell fine. And yes, people keep wearing your deodorant. I told her that I would rather address it with the individual, so let me know who it was. After literally sniffing our way through the cube farm, we discovered the smell was coming from her own desk drawer. We couldn't find the stinky culprit, so she ended up throwing everything out. Case closed. Story 18. Not HR, but a complaint raised against me. Hostile and unfriendly behavior. I had to explain to the head of HR that the complainant had walked up behind me whilst I was relieving myself at a urinal, launching into a detailed explanation of their computer problem. Rather than say, shut the F up, reboot your PC and leave me alone, I replied, please log a ticket for me. So yeah, prompting them to follow the proper procedure, never mind accosting me whilst urinating, was me being hostile. The complaint was promptly filed in the under-desk circular receptacle. Then tell them I would like to file a complaint for harassment in the workplace. They were trying to look at my wiener while urinating. Story 19. My work has one men's toilet. Had one coworker complain that another guy kept using the bathroom before him and doing big ol' poos. But the way he said it was like this guy knew when he was about to go, ninja'd in just before him, dropped a massive stinker, and then forced the other guy to marinate in the smell when he went for a leak afterwards. We ended up adding a can of air freshener to the bathroom, and the next complaint that came in was the poop guy never used it. I've worked in several places where they install those auto air fresheners. Beforehand, it smells like crap. After the fact, it smells like crap rolled in cinnamon. It looks like we've got ourselves a classic case of bathroom sabotage. It's like a game of chess, but instead of kings and pawns, we've got poop and air freshener. In all seriousness, though, it's important to have good bathroom etiquette in the workplace. No one wants to be caught in a stinky situation, whether it's because of someone else's big old poos or a lack of air freshener. Let's all do our part to make the bathroom experience as pleasant as possible for everyone involved. Story 20. Previous job, I worked with some huge butthole across the hall. I won't go into why he was a butthole, but one of the things he did was turn me into HR because I had a mini catapult on my desk, a desk toy that shot mini marshmallows. He claimed it was a weapon, and HR called me to clarify. When I told her what it was, she sighed and said if I took it home, she wouldn't make a case out of it. So I took it home. You should take a picture of the catapult, frame it, and put it on your desk. Story 21. I worked in HR, and my coworker hates me. She wanted someone else to get the job I did, and she would complain about me to management for anything. The final straw for everyone was when I sneezed, and she slammed her keyboard on her desk, basically ran out of the room, and didn't come back for 30 minutes. Management called me in and said that I was making too much noise. I told them I sneezed, and they said she would complain about me every day, so they didn't believe her, but had to make it look like they were doing something. She left shortly after. What a nutcase. Story 22. I was the big complainer. My buddy was dating a girl that worked in HR at my company. Their relationship starting was totally unrelated to me. They had gone to college together. He dumped her, and she didn't take it well, and started threatening my job since I was still friends with him. I lodged a complaint just through the main email, hrcomplaints@company.com or whatever it was. My complaint was assigned to, guess who? I ended up having to independently schedule a meeting with the VP of HR because the regular reps and middle managers were protecting their rep rather than believing me. It's like the plot of a bad rom-com. In a world where your buddy's ex is also in HR, one man must navigate the treacherous waters of corporate complaints and personal relationships. But seriously, that's a tough spot to be in. It's tough enough to lodge a complaint about someone, but when it gets assigned to their friend or ex-lover, yikes. Kudos to you for persisting and going all the way up the chain of command to get your complaint heard. Story 23. A woman claimed that people were spreading rumors about her sleeping with coworkers. The investigation wasn't even done yet when she moved in with one of the guys. The others showed me texts and nude pics she had sent them, and if that wasn't enough, she followed me home from the bar one night to make sure I was okay. I shut my door in her face, and the next day said I was too drunk and didn't realize she was there. Had enough from everything else, I didn't even need to bring that part into the conversation with her supervisor. That's Meredith. What the frick? Story 24. I don't know if this story fits, but I'll tell it anyway. I went to HR once to complain that my manager refused to give me a couple of vacation days. The HR lady reminded me about the boilerplate rule that vacation time must be mutually acceptable to the employee and the company. I then pulled out 6 more vacation requests that had all been denied, including one that was denied in writing for a reason that was not permitted. I asked her if the company is allowed to say that it's never acceptable. My last request was undenied. It sounds like you were well prepared with your evidence, though. It's important to stand up for yourself and fight for what you deserve. I hope that you were able to finally get the vacation time you needed. Story 25. Someone complained about another employee smelling of rotten chicken and feet. The scent was bad enough that no one wanted to work with that guy around. Had to put on hygiene fundamentals in the workplace presentation for that entire group since I couldn't single out smelly. I think he got the hint because he also got a haircut. Somewhere out there, there's a guy explaining, and that is why even my hair smelled like a KFC dumpster, plus Tarantino's house. Story 26. We had a complaint that the toilet roll holders were too low in the stalls because when a guy was taking a poo, his knees were hitting the holders. We then lifted all the stall's toilet roll holders, 8 inches on the whole company's site, so no knees would hit the toilet roll holders. No complaints since. HR working for the people. My arms are short and the toilet paper holder is too far. I keep falling off my seat. HR. Story 27. HR consultant for 10 plus years. You won't believe the amount of times I've had to shut people down for trying to sell their pyramid scheme side hustle in the office. Our HR got involved when an employee attempted to sell her used sports bras on the lunchroom table. She needed the money to fuel her multi-level marketing habit. Story 28. She came in with a complaint that she tried to give one of the younger guys a hug, and he refused. His story was that he basically had to run away. I had to explain to a middle-aged woman that it was not her right to hug people who didn't want to be hugged. She still didn't get it and left thinking she was still in the right. Story 29. Not me, but my mom has worked in HR for 20 plus years, and one time had to deal with a woman who would smear her crap all over the bathroom walls on a different day each week. She must have been a real thorough hand washer because it took longer than you would expect to find her, and she was immediately fired. Story 30. My partner is in HR. Someone took a crap on the job site. He was given a photo complete with measurements. The people that complained wanted DNA testing done. He's still not sure why they measured it. So they can match the projectile with the butthole that fired it, obviously. Story 31. Not HR, but workers' comp. We just had an associate file a claim this week because they burnt their mouth on their lunch. A lunch they brought from home and heated up in the microwave. The spineless company I used to work for would have paid the claim to not deal with it. Story 32. It was lunchtime and a client came in. My colleague was eating a sausage roll and had it on his desk. Next day, a formal complaint came through about my colleague's sausage roll and how unprofessional it was of him to have a sausage roll he was eating on his desk. Story 33. We had an employee walk out in the middle of third shift, leaving one person alone to do all the work. He came back a week later and asked us to write it up like he'd been let go, because he wanted to file for unemployment. Obviously, we wouldn't do that. Story 34. An employee used very derogatory terms to make fun of a customer who was in the back of the store while talking to the customer who was at the counter, who happened to be the other customer's mother. Yikes. Story 35. She wanted to lodge a complaint against a colleague who had a new TV delivered to the office instead of home, and she thought her colleague spending money on the TV was irresponsible. Story 36. 20 years in HR. 2 female employees visited me to complain that their female team member didn't wear underwear under her work pants. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.